I will be taking you a little bit more into the practicalities of the book that Jan and I wrote just over a year ago, called Organizing for Sustainability, as you can also see here on the first screen. So for today, I have a few things around which I have framed my story. So value creation is one of the key aspects. As you probably remember from the keynote Jan gave yesterday, that's where he almost left you in questioning, okay, this is all about value creation, but how do we do this? I will try to give you a little bit more depth into that. And then, well, it will be all about explaining the principles of business modeling and how you may apply that in developing or redeveloping your own sustainable business. As for introduction, what you have learned yesterday is really about transition, a world in transition, a world that is in need of organizations, of businesses that help us to overcome the challenges that our populations worldwide face. And one of the things that we argue is that we need to have a change of the value creation that we aspire. So in essence, this means we leave or we depart from the standard economic model in the way we perceive business models, and now think about business models that help us not just to make money, but help us to create a plethora of values simultaneously, of which money is just one, but not the only one, as you have been taught in business schools. So that's the background of the story today. In value creation, we have done some explorations, and because we have been studying the idea of circular economy very, very thoroughly, there was something that really triggered us, and that comes from our observations of how does the current economy create value, and what would we like to have if we move towards a circular economy. So we put it on a dimension, which is, well, very rudimentary as I speak. Starting from the idea of transformation. As we all know, in the economic system, we collect minerals from the earth. We do things with this to create products, and these products we sell. This is the basic of value creation in our current economic system. There has been done some research by some German professors about the question of the rucksack of that transformation process. The rucksack meaning how much earth do I need to move to get to the minerals I need? And so depending a little on the mineral, there is a ratio that tells us a little bit, okay, well, for 1 gram of gold, you need to move 100,000 kilograms of earth, something in that vicinity. If we move along, we have been contemplating, at least in Europe, we've been contemplating the idea of recycling from the 1980s onwards. We're creating a lot of waste. What can we do with the waste? Oh, let's just recycle that, which in practice normally comes down to burning it, which is a form of recycling. It's not the best way. And with the dawn of the circular economy, we are now trying to think about keeping value in products for as long as possible. This is what we now call the value creation along circularizing. How can we keep products and their components intact and their materials intact for a very long time, useful for people and valuable for the economic system? And then, of course, we also, because we are professors anyways, we look to the future. What can we expect to go if we go further into the future? Because circularizing is still very much focused on the economy and the products that we have. What about all the natural and biological systems that we use? We are using them up. So regeneration then comes into mind. Can we build business models that just not only preserve our products, but also help us to regenerate the natural and biological systems from which we get we got the minerals in the first place? And then beyond regeneration, it's about restoring. Can we restore the qualities of the natural and biological systems in such a way that they can operate without human intervention again? So this is basically what we've done with the idea of value creation, and we are in the way we model businesses and in the way we think about business modeling somewhere on this dimension. We want to move to circularization. That's something that also in the Dutch context from which I'm operating, is pushed on very hardly by the government, but we're not there yet. All right, that in mind, we have a changing value perspective, so we need to start thinking about changing business models. This picture was shown yesterday by Jan. So a business model is very simple. It has three components. We have the logical value creation, we have an organization model, and we have a revenue model, and all three are needed to comprise a business model. And then we have three types of business models that we have identified, at least business models that move towards a situation where we can say we are moving towards a way of sustainability. Platform business models making more efficient use of products. So we now have a product which is not used by us for the full day. So we can lend it or we can rent it to others. The platform business model helps us there because that gives access. The community-based business model is a little bit different in the way that it's community-centered. A community has a desire to create value around something, and they together build a business model around a series of values that they would like to create. In the Netherlands, we see this, for instance, emerging around the question of energy production or the question of waste treatment. So community business models arising from a neighborhood with the demand, we would like to generate our own electricity now, or we would like to have our own garbage collection arrangement. Last but not least, the circular business models, as I already said, a way to build an economic system or a business model within that economic system that allows us to preserve value of products, value of components, and value of materials for as long as possible. I need to make a very important remark here. A circular business is not so much about services, although that comes forth quite a lot, but it's really about products and possibly services that we can build on these products. But the products and the tangibilities are key here. This is background information. So this is a little bit of a stepping stone from where Jan left you yesterday in awe of the consideration of transformation and what transition and what can we do now. And now it's time to look at the structure of the business model template. The picture you have seen yesterday already. What we did, we asked the question, we have an activity we call business modeling, but this is very much tailored to the development of very traditional businesses. What can we do to change this a little bit? We took a very design-oriented approach here, saying, well, in design, we always start with thinking. What do we want to have? That's what we call the definition phase, right? So in the definition phase, you start to write down, to sketch the contours. Okay, this is what I would like to achieve. Then comes the design phase, which is, well, for the engineers amongst you, this is the tinkering part. This is where you get all the nuts and the bolts and you start to piece things together and see whether things work or don't work. And last but not least, we have the result phase, because at a moment in time, you will need to see whether what you have thought and you have designed would also work. So in the result phase, you're looking back, this is what I had in mind. This was my definition phase. How is it operating in practice? In full, the business model template has 10 building blocks, and all 10 building blocks have their individual parts to play, and they all need to be there in order to make the thing work. At least that's the proposition that we have. So in the definition phase, we have 3 building blocks. It's about motive and context. So where do you come from? What is it that bugs you on a day-to-day basis? The dream is very much on, okay, but what would you like to have? What would be the ideal picture? What would be the thing that you dream about at night? You lay in your bed saying, it would be wonderful to have this kind of a situation. And last but not least, how to make that practical, how to put that into a proposition. We've got all these kind of things. So the motive is something that impacts you. The dream shows the impact, what the impact of the business model will be, the dream you have, and the promise you make is the proposition. That's the practical promise. Because I wanted to be more practical than Jan could be yesterday in his 15-minute speech, I have tried to find a few cases that help us to understand this a bit further. But this is not an easy thing, because there is no case that covers all things immediately, at least not as far as I've been able to find. A few cases we are very familiar with, a few cases not. This is a case which is a case from the Netherlands. It's called Waka Waka. And I totally forgot what Waka Waka stands for, but it has its origins in some language. And Waka Waka has a very interesting business proposition. They build these devices that you can see here on the picture, which are solar charged batteries with lights in them. And this was inspired by an observation of the founder of the organization. Said, well, there are quite some remote areas, and he was visiting Africa a lot. And he said, well, in these remote areas, they have no connection to the electricity grid. So why not make something mobile? So the dream was bringing sustainable energy to people in remote areas. So he came up with the idea, and the business proposition is not just the device, but it's a little bit more elaborate, because these things are sold on the market in Europe, I think also in the US. And if someone buys one, you actually buy two. So one is for you, and the other one is for whomever is in a remote area not connected to the electricity grid. And the organization Waka Waka makes sure that the second exemplar of the device gets shipped to the right people. In a nutshell, I think this explains what we mean by the definition phase. There is a context, there is a worry, there is a dream. Wouldn't it be nice to have electricity brought to remote areas? And there is a proposition, buy one, give one. They are not unique in this. We see the same thing happening currently with Unilever, with their Pampers, their diapers sales. You buy diapers, you give diapers, those kind of things. Food for thought. We have a few additions here. The first question you get is, what kind of business model, type of business model would you like to have? Is that a platform, a community-based business model, or a circular business model? We took these three on board. We come from research into sustainable development. These were the three business models that at the moment of writing of the book were most fitting to the question how to move towards a sustainable business model. It may be that in the future we need to elaborate on these three, but it at least gives a basic choice, and it's not an isolated choice. So if you say, well, I would like to do a platform business model, but I'm working in a circular economy, so there will be something circular in there as well. That's all fine. You can combine them at least, but you need to specify a single one of these three as the key, and then you can always work around that. Second question that you then have is, with whom will I work together? Who are the collaborators who you would like to have in your working in your network? And this is not just businesses, because then we are going back to old business model thinking. We build up a supply chain and we're done. And sometimes the supply chain is still necessary. Most of the time will be necessary, but it may also be necessary to involve governmental agencies, or you need to have citizens on board. If you want to operate a factory in a local neighborhood, you will need to interact in one way or the other with the citizens that live there. Do they accept you? Can they collaborate with you? Maybe they have some other purpose in realizing the business model. So that's the second building block. The third one is about strategizing. What will the plan be that you will follow to realize your dream? So strategy, what you normally see in business model discussions is that business model is seen as a strategic tool. We say no, a strategy also needs to become a part of a business model, because you need to, in your business model, have a long-term perspective. How are you going to realize your business proposition? How are you going to keep it up and running in the long run? And then if you have decided on your business model, you decided on who to collaborate with, you have your strategy in place, then you need to, well, stipulate what will be your core activity, what will you do, what is the thing that you are very good at or you need to be good at in order to make it work. What we have seen in our research is mostly, many times, is new entrepreneurs are very much engaged with the idea that they have, and they try to solve all the problems themselves. And then on the other hand, what we have seen is that the most successful business models operate in collaboration with others. So there now lies an interesting balance. Do you do things yourself? Are you looking for collaboration? And where does the balance strike in such a way that you make advantage of the best of the others and you take advantage of the best of yourself? Lastly, in the design phase, so these are the 4 building blocks that build your design. And now comes the 5th building block in the design phase. And I cannot stress the importance of this last building block of the design phase, which is the external test. What you have done so far is thinking a lot, writing down, sketching the way you would like your business model to work. You have talked to others to be inspired to make decisions on, okay, this is a possible direction in which I could develop this part, but will it work? And before you go to the bank or before you go to a financier, you would like to get an idea on whether or not the design that you have in mind would fly. So the external test is essential in the design phase. You need to put the things to the test, the proof of the pudding, so to speak. So what you do, you invite a critical crowd, critical friends. So they can be critical, but still do that in a constructive and friendly way, critical friends. And you ask them to reflect on the things that you've done. And they will come back to you, say, well, it's such a sweet idea that you have, but it's rubbish. And that may be a very insightful thing for you, but they will not, of course, only say it's rubbish. They will also indicate, okay, but you need to think about the collaborators with whom you would like to make it work. Have you really thought it through? Did you contact them already? Are they willing to chip in? Is this aligned with their interests? Or the strategy that you have in mind, yes, well, for the coming 2 years, it will be fine. But after 3 years, we already see there will be some new legislation in effect, which will not help you to realize the strategy. How will you do that? How will you circumnavigate that problem? The critical friends help you to get rid of these, well, flaws in your thinking and basically straighten out the whole reason that you have. The external test, we made it part of the design phase. It will definitely be happening as well at the end of the result phase, but then it's practice that is the one that kicks you in the behind, because then you made mistakes and you see them back in practice. On the design phase, I also included a case, which I think is very interesting to see. This is a case which even started in my hometown, but it operates now worldwide. It's called Tony Chocolonely. I think it's a brand that's well known, at least in the European area. They make chocolate bars. And they started to think about this chocolate, I think more than 10 years ago. What they saw is that the farmers of the cocoa beans were paid poorly. And along the supply chain, there were other problems with poor pay and unreasonable prices paid and unreasonable profits made. So what they said is, we want to get rid of this modern day slavery. That was their credo at the start. And they started working on that. They're quite successful. They built a good brand, a strong brand. And now they come to the point where they put that strong brand further down to design parameters that they now use to develop their business model further. So, and it's a combination of things. So they say things about the sourcing. They say things about how they engage with transactions. So they say, we would like to pay a higher price. We want to know where our beans come from. they say something about the collaborators. So the farmers are no longer just suppliers somewhere at the beginning of the supply chain, but they are now part of the business model, saying, no, this is part of our business model. We make sure that the farmers get a strong position, a bargaining position, and a position in which they can cover costs, and they are able to make a better life. Strategically wise, it's a long-term perspective that they have in mind, but that's always what they do with the Tony Chocolonely brand, and they focus for the customer on better quality and productivity on all regards. Not as hammered out as the building blocks I just presented, but at least it gives a perspective on how you can deal with the ideas behind the design phase. And now comes the tricky part, because now we have, as I said, we have done, well, the dreaming, we have done the tinkering, and now we have to put that into action. So that's the third one, the result phase. And then we have two things. There is a building block, which is all about measuring impact. So you made a promise in your proposition, but how are we going to measure whether we bring that promise to life? And on the other hand, what values did we create? So it's illustrating how you measure the things on the one hand, and also reporting on how well you did. Those are the two building blocks in the result phase. Why is that important to think about this? Well, in economics, it's always very, very easy to measure things, right? Unless, of course, you speak to accountants who make things very difficult. At least the accountants I work with make my life always very difficult, because everything is now numbers and everything is costs. But in all honesty, what they can tell you is just the tip of the iceberg, as the picture illustrates. You see only what can be calculated in terms of euros or in terms of dollars or whatever currency you have. And all the other things that also are affected are not taken into consideration. This is a picture I was able to, we were able to borrow from our friend Babette Porcelein, who was also helping us out with hammering out a great many things in the book. And she does a lot of work on this. So this is a picture she drew in 2017, in which she wanted to illustrate, but how do we do carbon dioxide emissions? Something I came across in your country, and I can't see that, is solar system. They don't operate just in Nigeria. They also have other places, which is also one of the things I find fascinating here, because what they do, they provide a product, solar energy and clean cook stoves, and they are very strongly focused on women empowerment. And talking about impact, they can report on their websites for every country in which they operate how many people they've been able to reach. Now, I know that this in Nigeria, in terms of 800,000 people, is not a lot, right? Is it 220 million people living there? So it's breadcrumbs, but still, I mean, 800,000 people, put them together, it's a lot of people. It is really about making visible what values you create and making visible how you measure impact. And impact measurement possibly is through indicating, okay, this is the amount of people we've been able to reach and really helped in furthering their lives. So this is what I was able to get in a quick look around for cases that I thought fit into the BMT. If you are interested in this, there are multiple sites on which you can find more inspiring cases that help you to enrich your thinking.